We got our song. So we have a song, and then we're going to have our meeting after the song, okay? Yes, thank you, Sister Sherry. We now have our speaker for today, Brother Jackson Sufferant, and we'll be continuing with the book of Romans. So, greetings, Brother Jackson. Welcome.
Okay, brethren. So let's continue. So we started with chapter 2 last Sabbath, and we stopped at verse 16. So we will continue from verse 17 and try to conclude the chapter today. Okay, so in verse 1 of chapter 2, we saw how basically Paul, referring to those referenced in chapter 1, who, knowing the righteousness of the judgment of Elohim, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice, as the last verse of chapter 1 says. So here in chapter 2 it says, therefore you are inexcusable. So he's referencing that type of behavior, those who have that type of mindset of knowing the righteous judgment and yet do evil. So he's addressing that mindset in verse 1. It says, therefore you are inexcusable, applying in addressing the believers in Rome, and who he's addressing in Rome. He says, you are inexcusable. Inexcusable for what? whoever you are, whoever you are, whoever you are. See, he's not speaking of specific, whoever you are who judge. For in whatever you judge another, you condemn yourself. For you who judge practice the same thing. And that statement he made right there, you who judge are inexcusable because you who judge practice the same thing. He describes from that point on verse 2 all the way to verse 5, some of the problems, the problems that happen on account of that mindset. We know that the judgment of Elohim is according to truth against those who practice such things. So he contrasts that frame of mind of injustice. In other words, you're people condemning others while they themselves are guilty. However, he says, we know, speaking of the apostles and the believers, we know that the judgment of Elohim is according to truth. So he is not one to say and not do. He is not one who requires something that he himself does not do in principle. So his judgment is according to truth, not like a hypocritical judgment where one sins and yet condemns others for sinning. He himself is pure. So his judgment is done according to truth. And then Paul addresses the psyche, the mind in verse 3. Don't think this, O man, you who judge those practicing such things. So, okay, yes, others might be doing evil. It's true. But what are we doing? Maybe they're doing X, Y, and Z, but are you doing B in terms of sin? So, and as we will see as we read further on in Paul says, if you break one, you break them all. So we should never have the approach of condemning others and to bring others down, to make ourselves as if to make ourselves appear better than anyone else. If we're going to address anybody, it in terms of sin in their lives, it should be in a forgiving and merciful, trustworthy, and discerning way. Discerning, trustworthy, loving, forgiving, and merciful. That's how it should be. It should not be the contrary, as spoken of in verse 31 of chapter 1. Has to be done in the positive, not the negative, to lift the person up, to lift each other up, not to bring each other down. Don't think, he says, that those who practice such things yet condemn, yet those who judge others who do things and yet do the same thing, that they will escape the judgment of Elohim, the judgment of Elohim in truth. We should not even think that. And so, or do you despise his goodness? Let's make sure we're being very careful about that. And let's not confuse admonition with judgment. See, that's some people, sometimes I've noticed when people are admonished to do the same thing, they'll say, oh, don't judge. And they don't realize there's a difference between righteous judgment, admonition, and this type of judgment. This is the type of judgment that Elohim condemns, when one is either being undiscerning, like not realizing the person's the circumstances. They are not judging they are untrustworthy, they are unloving, they don't have the person's best interest in mind, and they are unforgiving and unmerciful. They're trying to tear down and they're trying to exalt themselves. This type of judgment is wrong. But we need to be discerning. We need to know right and wrong. And if a brother or sister is struggling in a sin, it is the good thing to do for the brother or for a brother or sister to encourage, to help that brother or sister overcome, if he or she is willing. And that's part of what discerning is about. We have to know the person's circumstance, and we need to know if the person is willing, or does the person love their sin and just wants to wallow in it. We don't impose. We should not impose, but we should be there, and not coming as if we have already necessarily are perfect, but rather as people helping each other run the race. If you understand, two tired, I'm using that as two people that are not perfect, that are helping each other along the way. When we do it with that mindset, in the helping and the receiving of help, it is beneficial. Sometimes people that are trying to be helped also are quick to push back. They're so suspicious, or whatever it might be, and especially people that are judgmental in themselves, that judge to condemn when they don't discern when someone's trying to help them, because they're so accustomed to condemning others. They think when someone's trying to help them that someone's trying to condemn them, but they're actually trying to be helpful, but they can't see that. They don't discern that. We must make sure we're not like that. We must make sure that we are receptive to encouragement, receptive to what is true, and not suspicious and judgmental. And what else can I say here? So, but in verse 5, but according with the hardness of your impenitent heart, you are treasuring up for yourself wrath in the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of Elohim. So by being hardened on both sides, either being impenitent, like we don't want to change, we don't feel any sense of remorse, we don't see any need to change, either in how we're judging others, or either in how we are receiving admonition, we store up wrath for the day of wrath, okay, of the righteous judgment of Elohim, who will render to each one according to his deeds. So this is how Elohim sees and communicates this to us, that in judgment, in all of the if we're going to judge, we need to make sure we're doing everything out of a discerning heart and mind, that we're trustworthy, that we're loving, that we're forgiving, that we are merciful, that we're not condemning someone as if we're perfect to exalt ourselves, but we're trying to be of help when the help is welcomed. Another thing, he says, tribulation. But he says, but to those who are self-seeking, remember what I said? They're self-seeking. We're just trying to lift ourselves up. We're just trying to glorify ourselves rather than really trying to be loving and helping. But to those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, indignation and wrath, tribulation and anguish on every soul of man who does evil. Everyone, there's no respecter of persons with him, of the Jew first, and also of the Greek, concerning tribulation, and concerning glory and honor and peace to everyone who works what is good, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek, in that order. The Yehudim first, then the nations represented by the Greek, but who works what is good. We need to work what is good. Goodness is what is beneficent, not self-seeking, what blesses and does not infringe or harm or infringe the innocent. So we must do these type of works that are good, for there is no partiality with Elohim. Okay, so we see a lot. So who show the work? So speaking of the Gentiles, he says, for not the hearers of the law are just in the sight of Elohim, but the doers of the law will be justified. Now that's in that's in general. Then he targets the Gentiles. He says, who do not have the law by nature do the things contained in the law. These also, not having the law, are a law to themselves, who show the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and between themselves their thoughts, accusing or else excusing them. In the day when Elohim will judge the secrets of men by Yeshua Messiah, according to my gospel. And this is where we left off last week. See, what's interesting is that, and this is why we need to really be those of us who are teaching, and that includes me, we all need to learn more and more. We need to understand the works of Elohim's hands by looking at nature, by looking at history. When we contrast the Yehudim, the Israelites, and the Gentiles, there's a stark difference in their approach. The Yehudim were actually taken, treasured, and given instruction by Elohim directly. The Gentiles were not. Yet the Gentiles naturally sought after what was good. This sounds bizarre, but it did. It doesn't mean every single person did. That's not what I'm saying. But among the Gentiles, there were certain lovers of truth, lovers of knowledge, who sought after things. They could you imagine their environment? Paganistic environment, yet somehow they sought after the one and only Elohim, and they risked their lives, their livelihood, their well-being to proclaim that in the midst of Gentiles having never received, you understand, a Torah. And that's why it's natural. By nature, some among them have done that. And they have acquired, and so Elohim has blessed them, those few, so that they can understand a lot of things about Elohim, having never been taught the way the Yehudim were. See, the Yehudim were given these things, but they and as if by bit and bridle told, do this or else. But these few among the Gentiles did not. There was no compulsion. There was no control. They sought it in their hearts. They looked at the heavens and concluded there is an Elohim who created all things. It's not a new thing. That's what Abraham did. That's what Abraham did. And when you see Paul is talking about the Gentiles and Jews and how that's what he's referring to. And if you do your research, and if you pay attention to what's important, what Elohim says is important in the Torah, above all things, you will see and clearly understand how those Gentiles were being led by the Logos of Elohim. Although they didn't have all of this information we have, but they sought it out, and they sacrificed themselves for those few. And we'll see more of that idea as we go. So let's go to verse 17 to 29. It says, in verse 17 of Romans chapter 2, indeed, you are called a Jew, and rest on the law, and make your boast in Elohim. So obviously in Rome, there are Jews, because remember who he's addressing. He's addressing the believers who are in Rome, as it says in verse 7 of chapter 1. To all who are in Rome, beloved of Elohim, called to be kadosh, called to be hagios, called to be saints, called to be holy, called to be sanctified. Those are the ones he's addressing. So he says, indeed, you are called a Jew, and rest on the law, and make your boast in Elohim, and know his will, and approve the things that are excellent, being instructed out of the law. Again, that's what I was saying before, how the Jews, they have these oracles, they have these things, but the thing is that they kind of, it's a sense of, yes, these things are all good, but what's your attitude? Is it gracious, or is it like, I've got it made, or I'm it, I'm the best of all, where we become holier than thou, And there's a part of one of the something in the Old Testament where that statement is made, is not made in the positive, to have that attitude of holier than thou. So yes, you are called a Yehudim, and rest on the law, and make your boast in Elohim, and know his will, and approve the things that are excellent, being instructed out of the Torah. Remember what he says, you who say do not commit adultery, do you do such things, right? As a matter of fact, we will read that. And he's reflecting again exactly what he did early, what is listed in through verse 1 and 5 and so on, that he did earlier on in chapter 2, but more specifically towards the Yehudim. So, and you are confident that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, having the form of knowledge and truth in the Torah, in the law, in the instruction. You therefore who teach another, do you not teach yourself? You who preach that a man should not steal, do you steal? You who say do not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who make your boast in the Torah, do you dishonor by breaking the Torah? For the name of Elohim is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you, as it is written. Right? That's a quote, and that reference of the names of the Gentiles being blasphemed on account of the Yehudim, of what they did. Is in several places in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament scriptures. So let's go through this, and then let's finish. Let me follow through. So it says, circumcision is indeed profitable if you keep the instruction, if you keep the law. But if you are a breaker of the law, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. And that's very clear in the Torah. If a person broke the commands of Elohim, unless he or she repented, they were eventually cut off from being his people. They were cut off as if they were no longer part of Israel. Verse 26, therefore, if an uncircumcised man keeps the righteous requirements of the law, will not his uncircumcision be counted as circumcision? Yes. And will not the physically uncircumcised, if he fulfills the law, judge you, even with your written code and circumcision are a transgressor of the law? For he is not a Jew, a Yehudi, who is one outwardly, nor is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Yehudi who is one inwardly. And circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not from man, but from Elohim. Let's go back. Again, this is the same message Paul has been conveying from the beginning of from verse 1 of chapter 2. Do you judge others while living in sin? That's the strong message. And that's basically it. Do not judge others if you yourself are sinning. And it's the judgment of unrighteous judgment. Again, it's very clear. It's not wrong. Like, I'm going to give you an example. No believer should be smoking, right? But you could imagine two people, both of them struggle with smoking, right? But one who is